Good morning, Andy Johnson. We are talking about teaching cognitive processes, thinking skills, how to think, or critical thinking. And cognition means thinking. Cognitive processes, a process is a series of actions, operations, or functions that bring about a specific result. And they are taught explicitly, thinking skills. So a thinking skill is any cognitive process broken down into steps and taught explicitly. For example, if I want to teach students how to infer, I cannot assume they know how to do that. I would define the process first, and there it is, and I would break the process down into steps. I like to use what are called graphic organizers, and I would give them an example. For instance, what do you think Dorothy's life was like when she returned to Kansas? Here are the clues and then our inferences. This idea is based on Vygotsky's theory that thinking moves from outside to in. We teach it explicitly, that's the outside, and eventually students internalize the process. Now, the goal of teaching thinking skills or a cognitive process is automaticity, that students, after regular practice, can do the skill without thinking about it. They can perform the steps without thinking about it. In this sense, teaching a cognitive process is like teaching a wrestling skill. We break down the steps explicitly. We teach it. We run through it. So eventually in the match, they don't have to think, what should I do now? They just do it automatically. Thinking moves from outside to in, and we internalize the process. So, what are the steps? You say, number 1, in your discipline, identify a cognitive process that students need to do. I cannot help you here, but let me give you an example. In writing academic papers, students, after they take notes, they need to look at their notes, look for reoccurring themes, and create groups. That's how you move things into paragraphs or sections. Here is the process. Here are the steps. Look at the whole, identify recurrent themes, arrange your groups, describe the whole in terms of groups. Also, when we create sections or paragraphs, here is a process. What we do. Web and brainstorm. You can see that there, and I like to make it very visual. Here's a topic. Here are 3 sub-ideas and brainstorm on each one. That's how you teach paragraphs, by the way. It is also how you teach creating sections in a paper. So, step number 2, after you have done that. High-level thinking. Note, that is different from simply responding. There's more than one operation or step. So, you have to break the process into steps. And here's a process. Support a statement using appropriate reasons, details, or examples to support a statement, idea, or conclusion. These are the steps. I call this a thinking frame. A thinking frame. The steps of the process are, the process is broken into steps, and I actually make that into a poster. So I use thinking frame. The steps used in a skill are displayed, put on a poster. I did this in my wrestling room as well. I would break a particular skill into steps, and I would put that on the wall so students could refer to it. I would teach the process explicitly. You cannot assume that students know how to do any high-level thinking process. For example, you ask them to compare and contrast. Don't assume that they know how to do that. Teach it to them explicitly. And I use graphic organizers to the greatest extent possible. That's any visual used to organize thoughts, words, steps, or processes. Makes it easy. Here's an example. Support a statement. Use appropriate reasons, details, or examples to support a statement. Here's the statement, I'm a great teacher, and then supporting evidence. This, by the way, is a great way to teach paragraphs as well. Step 3, teach the skill. First, in teaching a skill, you have to model the skill. This gives students a sense of the whole. They see how and where it is used. And again, in my wrestling room, I would show them the skill. In my classroom, I would show them the creating groups skill. You use cognitive modeling. This is where students are able to see your thinking. You think out loud. Then you teach the steps explicitly. This is where you teach how you do it, why you do it, when you do it, and exactly what to do. Explicitly, thinking moves from outside to in. We use then scaffolded instruction or guided practice. We do this in a large group. We do it together as a group. Here in this wrestling room, you can see the coach is taking the whole group through the steps. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. All right? So you take them through the skill together in large group. In creating groups, I would have a list of notes, and together we would think out loud to create groups as we are looking at a set of notes. You want them to practice the skill somehow after this guided practice or scaffolded instruction. Practicing in pairs or small groups is preferred because they hear the thinking of others. So if I was doing creating groups, I might put them in small groups and have them find groups together. In my wrestling room, I would put them in groups of 3 or 4 to practice the skill. And eventually, you want students to practice the skill by themselves. Now, they're not going to master the skill after the first lesson. Practice over time. You need to revisit the skill. Know that. Step 4, review and revisit. Mastery happens over time. It is not a drive-through experience. And just like the single leg takedown, we had to practice it in different situations. You learn the skill at higher and higher levels over time. And I'm a big believer in thinking frames. You have the posters that has the steps of the skill, steps of the process broken down, or the process broken down into steps, so you can refer to that. Boys and girls, remember, we are using a comprehension skill, and here are the steps. Remember, we are going to create groups with our notes. Here are the steps. We're going to do the single leg takedown. Here are the steps. That is the basics. Here's another thinking frame. Teaching cognitive processes. Pretty simple, but there are some particular steps to follow.